Hey everybody, I'm Peter Curran. I'm the General Manager for Digital Commerce at Lucidworks, and I'm really happy to be here with you wherever you are today. I'm in my basement. Welcome to my basement. I'm going to talk to you today about scalable and proactive e-commerce business operations, and I've given it a subtitle of Two Miltons, a Melvin, and a Galileo. And I'll take you on a journey that I hope is at least a little bit entertaining and very informative. A little bit about me before I get started. I'm from Jackson Hole, Wyoming. I thought I was going to be a lawyer, so I got a degree in English that's been completely useless in terms of helping me find work, but got into enterprise software 25 years ago. I've been building e-commerce sites since then. I've worked for a bunch of different companies and web content management and knowledge management and e-commerce, and was the president and founder of a company called Cirrus 10 for 10 years. Did Endeca implementations and solar implementations with my team, and got acquired by Lucidworks on December 31st of last year. So that's me. This is me in my natural state. I normally don't hang out in my basement. I normally take people out to dinner for a living, and I wish we were living in those times again. I can't wait until all this coronavirus business is over. My thesis is something that I was always taught to write in a paper in English, and so I want to start this presentation with the thesis. I'm not going to read it to you. There's a lot of words here. It's really for anybody who's reviewing these slides after the fact, but basically the bolded part at the bottom is my thesis. Companies ought to reorganize themselves, and they ought to do it to ensure that business users are engaged in the machine learning model assembly process. And what do I mean by that? What I mean is that right now, machine learning is nerd stuff, right? We don't talk to the business users about what we're doing with machine learning. The business users are supposed to complain about problems, and then the technical people are supposed to go fix the problems. I don't believe in that world. I believe in a world where the business user and the person who knows the technology work together to solve customer problems. And what I want to do is persuade you that we need to change the way we operate businesses in e-commerce along these lines. To do this, I want to go back to kind of a tried and true slide from Lucidworks history. This is Grant Ingersoll's search maturity curve. Now, I don't talk about Lucidworks doing search anymore. We talk about product discovery, because we can do search, we can do landing pages, we can do recommendations, we can do SEM buys, we can do all kinds of stuff around e-commerce beyond search. But I do think that this is kind of a compelling and useful slide, because it shows what really is a common progression for most companies over the last 20 years of e-commerce. And so what I want to do is start by characterizing the world of the stage 0 basic search and what that looks and feels like, transport you along the other stages. And I'm going to stop in stage 2. We won't get to stage 3. Maybe we'll do that next year. So the way that I want to do this, the way that I want to characterize stage 0, is I want to go back to one of my favorite movies. This is Office Space. I hope you all know this movie. It's one of my favorites. Over 20 years old now. I can't believe it. When I moved to the Bay Area in 2000 to participate in this .com boom, this movie really resonated with me. It was exactly what life felt like on certain days. So the way that you are in stage 0 is if you feel like this at work, right? Where the boss comes up and says, hey, I was just on the website searching for something and it came back with something else, or I couldn't find it. What's going on? Fix it. And so what they ask you to then do is go and curate and build some kind of a new solution to solve that particular problem. That's that specific keyword that he doesn't like. And that reactive approach is usually followed by going into something slightly more proactive, but still very reactive in a different sense, which is a report like this. This is the classic null results report. Most people still look at this kind of report to this day. Lucidworks has reports for things like this in Fusion. But while this is a little bit more proactive than waiting for your boss to call with some kind of problem that makes her angry, it's still reactive, right? Because if you look at what this report is telling me, it's telling me that tens of thousands of people had to have a crummy experience before I bother to go and fix it, right? And that's not good customer service. What we want to be able to do is be proactive, right? We want to solve these problems before people experience them. The other thing that's really kind of interesting is that if you look at this particular zero search results case, Lysol spray, which is this company's #1 item. This is a real report from a certain company. Is that problem repeats itself with different language. So we've got Lysol spray, we've got disinfectant spray, we've got Lysol disinfectant spray. We've got things that don't use those words but are trying to solve the same goal, like antibacterial wipes and other forms of disinfectant spray that have different capitalization that Adobe can't tell the difference between. So, if you think about it, really this is a customer goal manifest in several different lexical combinations in this particular report. And so as a business user, not only am I reacting to the 10,000 people who got a crummy experience in Lysol spray, it's really more like 50,000 people or 150,000 people who had a crummy experience trying to buy something that will kill germs on their countertop or in their car. So what that then means is that we're not serving customer goals, right? So if you think about that problem, it means that you're just never going to get to the end of it. You'll never fix yourself all the way into the tail. And that's a problem. So once you start building these rules around Lysol spray and Lysol disinfectant spray and nitrile gloves and medical gloves and so on and so forth, you fix all of these different things one at a time, you end up with a set of rules that is so big and so unwieldy that you can't manage it. I was on the phone with a company just a couple hours ago this morning. They were talking about having 10,000 rules for their facets. That is completely absurd. It's impossible to wrap your head around that many rules, even if you're a business team of 30. And so when you get into that place, you start to look like our customer Lululemon, how they looked when they spoke at our conference with me last year, is you end up being like a double hung window that's caulked shut. It's a platform that has functionality, but because of the need to make it more efficient, caulk it, you kill all that functionality, and that's really what 10,000 rules around facets or all of these redirects and synonyms that you end up creating, responding to your boss and looking at the null results report, that's what you get. You get a window that's caulked shut. And we know that this is a unscalable proposition, right? If you take this is I think a week-long time frame at a wide assortment retailer, and you break all of the terms that people are looking for out by popularity. And so on the very left is the #1 most popular term, and on the very right is the 50,000th most popular term over this couple days in 2018. And you see the graph looks the way that it does, the blue line. It's a straight cliff and then a straight plateau across the bottom. And what that means is that you have about 500 searches or so, and maybe for you it's 5,000 and maybe for you it's 50, but you have some relatively small number of terms in the head that you can curate around. And that represents about 40% of your traffic, maybe 50% for you, maybe 70% for you, maybe 20% for you, but it represents some big chunk of your traffic. But all of those other searches, the thousands and thousands and thousands of combinations of Lysol spray and disinfectant spray and medical gloves and nitrile gloves and rubber gloves, all of those different combinations represent really the bulk of your traffic. And so you can't scale yourself around 50,000 because, we're looking at that set of terms from which are all sort of coronavirus related. Well, it's going to be totally different at Christmas. It's going to be totally different, at Father's Day. It's going to be totally different. What if there's a huge snowstorm that happens in January and socks in the entire East Coast? Well, then it's all going to be about snow stuff. So it's not, theoretically, you could curate your way around 50,000 terms, but the 50,000 are always changing. And so that's the key, the problem here. So the other problem is that these head queries that you can curate around are kind of useless queries, right? I mean, if it's an apparel company, let's say it's women's apparel and you're searching for blouse, you can curate your way to a redirect that shows blouses on the screen. But people who just search for one word like that, they don't have a really high intent to purchase. But somebody who searches for, a button down, striped blouse, for example, is looking for something pretty specific, and she has a much higher likelihood of actually purchasing. So that means that these tail queries, the ones that you don't have time to curate around, are the ones that have the best conversion rate. And so the highest likelihood, the highest propensity to purchase customers are one who get the crummiest experience. And that's no good, right? We can't live with that. So what do? You re-platform, right? You take your old technology platform and you get rid of it, like they got rid of the printer in Office Space. And so then you find yourself out of basic search stage 0 and on to user-driven search stage 1. Now, there are two different ways you can go with this. You can migrate to Lucidworks and you can enable signals, and I'm going to talk a little bit about signals in a bit. But one thing that a lot of companies do is search is so irritating that they just go and buy a black box search technology. And there's a whole gaggle of these out there. There are just dozens of them. And some of them are pricey and, pretty good. And some of them are super cheap and pretty crummy. And some of them are cheap and good. They're all over the place. But the thing is that they use some amount of statistical modeling. They may have some machine learning capabilities, but at the end of the day, they are a black box. And so what does that look like when you're in a black box search platform? It looks really similar to everybody else who uses that black box search platform. In other words, the way that if you're selling apparel, the machine learning and the algorithms may be able to change a little bit to fit apparel, but it's basically going to work the same way for apparel that it does for hardware, that it does for jewelry, that it does for gifting. All these different things kind of look the same to a black box machine learning or statistical platform. And the problem with that is that while you get a little bit of lift out of stage 0, you just reach a new plateau. And that's not what we're all about in e-commerce, right? We want to have some kind of continuous improvement and continuous return of value to the business on the investments that we make in technology. So while turning on signals works, and the black box, machine learning, if it actually is machine learning, parlor trick does in fact work, but it just yields some new plateau. And so what we want to do is I want to talk and spend really the bulk of the time that we have together today, or the rest of the time that we have, focusing on what does it mean to arrive at continuous improvement. So, of course, what this implies is that if you did go to those black box search platforms, you'd need to re-platform again. And, we have a platform that can help you. So then where are we now? We're talking about getting to experiment-driven stage 2, which you can see Grant has defined as 1,000 experiments a year. So I'm not talking about UI A/B testing in Optimizely or Adobe Target. We're talking about back-end algorithmic A/B testing using machine learning, using intent detection, natural language processing, recommendations, true personalization, things like that. So how I want to talk about that is I want to introduce you to this guy. So probably most of you know Galileo. He was not from Jackson Hole. He was from Pisa, where he graduated from university. I don't know what he studied. Probably not English and history, thankfully. But he's considered the father of the scientific method and physics. He invented things like the thermometer and the military compass. And one of the things that I love that Galileo said is that math is the language of nature. Now, Galileo lived in this really religious and sort of restrictive environment where he critiqued the idea that the Earth is the center of the universe and all of that, and got into a lot of trouble over it. So he said this actually a little bit differently than math is the language of nature, but if you translate it roughly, this is what the guy said. And I love this saying because it's true. If you look a lot of natural phenomena, then you can kind of boil those down into mathematics, especially the way the heavens move, right? That is something that's very predictable, or the tides. These are things that we observe in nature that are interesting and beautiful, and yet they can be reduced to a certain extent down to mathematical formulas. And what I would want to persuade you to believe is that if math is the language of nature, signals are the language of users. And that's why we at Lucidworks talk so much about signals, is because this is the way that you get in touch with the user who is there behind the phone or the desktop screen shopping for something on your website. And so the implications of this, if you agree with me and believe that signals are the language of users, and it's really self-evident at this point, right? Because we all know that companies like Netflix and Google, and with things like YouTube or Amazon, things like technologies and companies like that are constantly watching and listening to everything we do. And the reason that they're doing that is they're trying to understand who we are so that they can deliver optimal. It's not because they're creeps. Maybe they are creeps, but that's not really ultimately the reason why they were doing it. The reason that they're doing it is they want to understand the customer better so that they can deliver an experience, and that really that's what you should be thinking about doing too. And if you do start to think about doing that and heading down the road of building algorithmic, machine learning driven product discovery features, then what that means is that you're going to spend your time in a certain way. And this company, Cloud Factory, says that you're going to spend about 80% of your time identifying data, labeling it, cleaning it up, augmenting it, so on and so forth. And then you're only going to spend 20% of your time doing the actual machine learning. And while I applaud them for showing that data wrangling is an important task, I disagree that it's 80%. Now, they sell a data wrangling tool, so having it be 80% is in their best interest. I reckon it's more like 50%. But the point is that you have to spend a lot of time caring about bringing more data into your platform and making sure that that you have a good quality, high fidelity signal. So that means doing things like when you exercise a set of activities in an automated regression test, you should be able to see the right statistical representation in your analytics platform that corresponds with that activities. And that should be a regression test that you automate and run. So gathering data, gathering good quality data, organizing it, and putting it into a product discovery platform is a way to start to understand your users at a mathematical or signal-driven way. It's important to remember, however, that nature is not math. So the stars are not equations, and the tides are not mathematical formulas. It's the tide, it's the stars. And similarly, signals are not users. And so To explain this idea a little bit, I want to focus on somebody else. This is the second Milton. Of course, Office Space was originally based on a screenplay called Milton, or I think a book called Milton. This is Milton Friedman, and Milton Friedman is a little bit of a controversial figure. Some people are not super big fans of his, but he said something really interesting that I want to latch on to. And if you don't know who he is, he won the Nobel Prize in Economics in 1976, largely focused on monetary policy and curbing inflation problems that we had in this country in the 1970s. As a matter of fact, he thought we should have gotten rid of the whole concept of the central bank and instead switched to just a computer program that gradually increased the supply of money in the economy. But one thing that he said that I really love is that he says the billiard player makes shots as if she knows the complicated mathematical formulas governing the game. And so what he means by this is that the person who is an expert in something, whether it's an expert in driving a truck or an expert in playing pool or an expert in e-commerce, a business expert in e-commerce, that person naturally makes decisions as if, from their experience, as if they really do understand the math that's behind the interaction. And so what that then means to me is that the merchandiser, the business user, when they curate a user experience, they are acting as if they understand the motivations of a human being. And so what that means to me is that we need to connect that merchandiser who understands those motivations and who acts on them naturally when they curate an experience. We need their help reducing that behavior into a model that we can then tweak and improve for continuous improvement. And so I think here's the thing, right, is that when we look at technologies like machine learning, we tend to say that's for the technical people. The business people don't need to worry about that. And I just think that's fundamentally false. If the business user understands the products, the customers, and we know that that person can't curate everything, and we know that models are the solution to that problem, then why aren't we engaging the business in building models? And I think it's because we mistakenly believe that business users like me can't understand what models are. And so I want to break that up a little bit. The way I'm going to do this, there are lots of different kinds of models out there. I'm going to talk about two different kinds. There are many kinds, but I'm going to talk about two. The first one is kind of a non-machine learning, signal-based type approach. And the second one uses deep learning and dense vectors. And I'm going to kind of show you where the business user provides input into these different ideas. So for the first one, this is the classic Walmart-based, Walmart wrote a paper, I think in 2013, that kind of described this approach for doing learning to rank and re-ranking products in e-commerce. What they said was, I think it was just slightly more complicated than this, but basically this, they said for any context, anytime somebody does a search or somebody makes a navigation decision in an e-commerce website, then we're going to assign points to different kinds of activities, different signals. So we're going to give a point to a click, we're going to give 5 points to a cart event, and we're going to give 25 points to a purchase event. And then we're going to aggregate all of that stuff up, and we're going to do some kind of decay so that old signals from 3 months ago are not as important as signals from yesterday. And we're going to use this to automate the way that we order products in e-commerce search. And I think you can understand that, right? This is just a simple, we're going to give points for different kinds of activities, just like we give 3 points to a field goal and 6 points to a touchdown in football. We're going to give a different number of points to different kinds of activities in e-commerce. But when you think about it, that's really limiting. And a business user who looks at that says, well, I think a click is kind of a bad thing, right? I mean, if they clicked it and they didn't buy it, why are we boosting that product up? And so you could say, all right, well, if a product gets seen, I'm going to take a point away from it and then only give it its right to stay seen above the fold if somebody clicks it. And similarly, if somebody purchases it at full price versus at a discount, I'm going to give them an extra 25, that product, an extra 25 points for that purchase, and so on and so forth. So you can see that once we engage a business user and a business user uses their innate understanding of the user and the products, they will start to think of ways to complicate the model. And then it becomes our job as IT practitioners to build that model out. So the second model I want to talk about is one that uses deep learning, and this is for a zero results case. So take a query, for example, that yields no results. If we then ignore all the sessions where the user goes up and searches again, and instead we focus only on the sessions where the user browses and clicks their way to a product and adds one to the cart, we can aggregate all of those products that get added to the cart, the first one, after a zero search results event, and then we can plot that into vector space. And if we don't like the set of products that are coming back, maybe do some, because it's not enough of them, do some natural language processing to expand the number of results that we show. Then we can algorithmically and dynamically solve zero results problems, which is a great business user problem to solve. It's the source of the null results report that we saw at the beginning. So this is the idea here, is that a business user might have an idea about how we can identify what somebody means just based on signals, and underlines why we think signals and data is so important. So really, business sense and computer science is what this is all about, and this is why we believe business users need to be involved. So let's now think about how we organize our work. There are a set of things here that I think business-minded people should be doing, and a set of things that IT-minded people should be doing. So business users need to understand what signals we've got. They've got to identify new sources of signals, ask for them. I want to know this about the user. They need to be able to describe their hypothesis, describe the model, and adjust those models in a runtime environment. And IT's job is to deliver all of those capabilities to them, make it possible for the business user to operate 365 days a year, and not just in the 6 months in the run up to a holiday peak. That's the way we organize our tasks. How do we organize our people? I would say that we fall back to Melvin Conway's law and think about Conway's law of computer science, which says an organization designs systems whose design will mimic the organizational structure of that company. And if you divorce the business and IT in your company, then you will produce divorced e-commerce experiences. And so I would say organize in agile cross-functional teams, build RACI charts that describe who's going to do what, and have a customer and business first mindset. And then lastly, and probably most importantly, actively deconstruct the concept of heroism in your company. Don't allow the one really great guy in IT and the one really great person in the business team to carry the load for everybody else. Demand shared accountability across the team. And so if that's how we organize our tasks and our time, our people, how do we organize our time? I would say for data wrangling, you should do some kind of a quarterly or annual cadence. Be patient. Let the work on identifying new signal sources, bringing them in, making sure that they're correlated and put into collections carefully is done in kind of longer typical type IT coding type projects. But then for business experiments, start somewhere. Say, what is the maximum number of experiments that I can imagine myself doing in a year? And if the answer is 1, that's fine. Do 1 experiment this year. And then next year, do 2. And the year after that, do 4. And double it or have it as time goes on. Remembering that at this phase, Grant says we need to be doing 1,000 experiments per year. That's 1 every 2 hours. You need to ask yourself if you're ready to do that. So that's my content for today. Thank you very much, everybody, for your time and attention. I'm Peter Curran. You can email me or text me or call me at these numbers. I look forward to collaborating with you. Thank you very much.